What's up, Photoshop fam? I'm Rick Navarro, and this is the Pixel Laundry Photoshop Academy. You should never be looking at that for color accuracy. What you do want to be looking at is this right here, and this is called your histogram. And your histogram is going to give you all of the color information that is kind of like the back end, the digitally processed color information that is going to tell you whether your image has been properly exposed or not. So we could zoom in real tight here to some of these little highlights and say, oh, you know, is there detail there? Have I lost my detail, or, you know, am I underexposed? Well, I don't actually have to look at that, even though I may be visually able to tell. It may not be telling me what's actually happening in the picture. What I want to do is look right here. And the main thing I'm looking for is clipping. And clipping is anytime any of these little charts, any of these little graphs go up and off of this page, they blast all the way up. Now I'm gonna purposely push this image so you can see what I'm talking about. Let's go ahead and bring the exposure way up. Now notice what happened. All of the colors, these are the individual channels, pushed all the way to the right, and they pushed all the way up. And this right here, this flattening out, this top edge where these peaks go off of the page, is what's known as clipping. And clipping is where you are losing your color information. Now if I zoom back out and you look at the actual image, you can tell that this image is being clipped. Okay, and that basically means that I'm losing my color information, and we don't want that to happen. And at least initially, if you're in a situation where you're shooting and you're trying to eye and see if you are properly exposed, or you don't have a light meter to be able to measure whether your exposure on your lights and your camera is well balanced, you can look at your histogram very quickly, very easily, without any of those additional tools, and get a gauge on where you are in that spectrum. Now I've got this little highlight warning on, and that's what you're seeing right here. And basically anything that's turning red means that I'm losing color information. Let's push that a little bit further. Now you can see here how we've gotten red all the way in the background. We're starting to lose all detail, all color information. It's disappearing. And the further I push this, the more red it's going to get saturated. You see? So now this means that, like, if I turn this off, there is basically nothing there. Now, if you're going for this for effect, it could work, it could be cool, depending on your subject matter. But if you're going for this as just a general exposure, let's say for like a fashion e-commerce thing, obviously that may not be good. Now, there is a bit of stylistic choice that you could be making here by just adjusting your exposure here. Like I said, like, this might be a preference, it might be a style that you're going for, and it could work. But in general purposes, this is probably not the best image to start with. Now, in the same way, if I swing it all the way down to underexpose it, again, could be a stylistic choice. I may be wanting to selectively bring up these colors and leave it very kind of dark and moody and mysterious. But for the most part, it's not going to be a great image to start with. Now, I don't like to do major edits like this in Camera Raw, though you can even batch process them out, which I'm going to show you here in just a moment, where you're applying the same effect across the board. But I typically don't like to do that because it kind of locks you in to a certain degree. Now, that being said, whatever I do in here, it's actually going to save a meta file or an XMP file with the CR2 wherever I opened it. So if I just go done, if I just click on done, it's going to close. But then if you'll notice right here, right under the file, a little extra written file was saved with that. And that's basically saving all of my metadata, which is basically all of the parameters that were adjusted in my raw file edit. So even though when I look at the raw file right here, it doesn't look like anything has been done. But if I reopen it back up, look, all of my effects are still present. So that's one of the cool things about this. You can kind of work this way. Now, if I open this up in Photoshop, however, if I just go ahead and hit open, it is going to bake those edits inside, and then I'm not going to be able to take them off. So this is why I have to be 100% sure that I am in a place that I'm happy with in my raw editor before I open it up in Photoshop, because once I do that, then I've got a different problem. Now, if when I go to save, I'm going to save that as a PSD or a TIFF, a layered PSD or a layered TIFF, so that that way I'm not messing with the raw. And again, this is another way to work non-destructively and to always have an original image to go back to. But again, I don't really like to do that, so I'm just going to do basic edits here. And if I want to restore that, I can just go back to the camera raw defaults right here in this little drop down, and then I'm back to where I started. So like I said, this is where I like to do some of my basic edits, and at first glance, well, before we do that, let's go through some of these tabs. Okay, so right here you're going to have all of these kind of basic, kind of sub-level basic parameters that will allow you to adjust any of these things: highlights, contrast, exposure, white shadows, texture, clarity, so on and so forth. Okay, you also have an opportunity here to adjust the color balance. If it wasn't white balanced on set or in camera, you can make adjustments, or even if it was and you want to maybe cool it down a little bit, you know, or warm it back up. Just depends on what you're going for. You can also do it by the default, whichever was shot. Let's say you move it all the way out here and you want to take it back. You've got a little drop down with some presets right here. Depending on the lighting situation or the lighting effect that you're going for, you've got some presets right here. You have some color profiles. I usually use the default. This is also going to give you some presets that you kind of look over. You have some that you can just save. You know, if there's one preset that you like to use on a regular basis, you have an option there. Hit close. Okay, this one is almost like having a built-in curves editor, like a curves adjustment layer, which we've talked about in previous episodes, you know, where I can immediately start to maybe add a little contrast and some saturation, and I can do that. But remember, I'm baking that in, so choose wisely. You can also, by just clicking in, you can start adding lots and lots of points and making your adjustments that way. Okay, linear is your default, and that's what I'm going to go back to. You also have another way to edit this here with some sliders, where if you just want to be a little bit more specific and edit maybe in the highlights or in the lights or in the shadows, maybe I want to bring those lights down a little bit so I'm not so overexposed. And you can see automatically it's starting to saturate, and you're getting some really, really nice things happening to the colors while not destroying the histogram. Now, I'm going to show you here in a second, but when you start to do these edits inside of Photoshop, now you're going to start to break up this histogram. So this is the difference between editing in RAW versus editing in Photoshop within itself. You're maintaining the integrity of the color inside of your histogram, which is vitally, vitally important, especially to start out with. Okay, once you get in, you can kind of take it wherever you want, but when you start out with, you typically want to have as much color information, as much latitude as you possibly can. Okay, you've got a sharpening parameter here and a noise reduction. Right here, this isn't very noisy. It was shot at ISO 200, so there's not going to be a lot of noise. But if you did, let's say you're in a low light situation and, you know, for some reason your ISO, the camera's ISO settings these days are out of this world. You're able to do, you know, basically shoot in pitch black and get a decent exposure. But let's say it was noisy for some reason, you'd be able to work on some of the noise reduction there. This is a very cool, one I like to do, especially in mass editing, where I've got, like, you know, maybe 50 images that are, let's say, all shot in this same scenario, and that's key. That's very crucial that they have to be shot in a very similar situation in order for you to make that edit. But I want to reduce the amount of saturation that may be happening globally across all of those images. I can come in here and let's just say this orange is a little hot for me, so I'm going to bring it down a little bit.